Hello and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I'm your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are diving deep into the world of Manifest Destiny Volumes 3 and 4. And I think safe to say this is a much grittier book now.
Yeah, it gets a little darker.
Pretty grim.
Pretty dark.
Yeah.
It gets pretty dark. Yeah.
Which I was waiting for in some sense, because I was like, after Volumes 1 and 2, when you pick up a title called Manifest Destiny and you see that it's about Lewis and Clark and them, you know, eradicating whatever was on the land before that came before it, you would assume in the 20 teens and 2020s that it's kind of like watching villains. But in Volumes 1 and 2, you're rooting for them and you're like, oh, they're so clever, they overcame this, they did this. So you're kind of rooting for them a little bit. And then here you see them like, I don't know, I'm like, can you imagine if Return of the Jedi ended with them slaughtering the Ewoks?
Yeah.
Like, hey, thanks for the help.
Yeah, no, I agree. I that's interesting. I didn't think about it in that way of like waiting for that turn or expecting it. But now that you like totally, now that you said it, absolutely, because you expect there to be some sort of commentary, and obviously we're referencing mainly the end of Volume 3. Right, like that is by far the darkest moment. Where
there's also cannibalism in Volume 4. I mean,
yeah, but
that's when it opens the
that's one of those things that is, you know, maybe not, that's very Donner Party-esque, you know, things that happen there. But this idea of when we talk about, as we've been talking about, like where are wondering if there were going to be any moments of kind of overt commentary or metaphor, right? What kind of replacement for kind of the brutality of the core discovery that we assume happened because we know how white explorers treated the land and treated the native population that was already there. You know, whether it was specific to the Lewis and Clark expedition or just in general, right?
Right.
We know there has been a re-examination of that. So how are they going to show that here? What were they going to do? Or I guess really the question was, were they going to do it? And I think it was, I did think it was important to show that, you know, that while on some level and maybe like just at the surface, but on even that little itty bitty level, there's some nobility to what they're doing, kind of, maybe, right?
They're in like
the
at
idea
least
of exploration,
somewhat relatable.
Yeah. But then to have them come across, you know, a sentient species, you know, with the level, with like, you know, effectively near human level kind of reasoning, to interact with them and then to go slaughter them and have it be seen of like, well, kind of had to because they're dangerous.
Well, because they're dangerous,
you know,
and we can't trust them to like
not turn on
uphold the arrangement we've worked out with them. Yeah. We don't trust them to treat the next people the same way.
Yeah.
And this is all about the next people.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of dark enough as it is, but I think it's really reinforced in Volume 4 when they talk about that, like that was like a real bonding moment for everybody. You know, they look back on it like, and now like everyone's kind of on the same page now. Like they needed a moment where, you know, it was like the core was all kind of fractured, right? Because you had actual officers, you had civilian volunteers, you had whatever criminals that were kind of conscripted to them. And like after this slaughter of this race of beings, this race of animals, everyone's kind of like, hey man, now we're all pulling in the same direction. Like, wasn't that a great team building exercise? Like that's kind of how it's treated, you know? That's and the way that Lewis writes about it is in a not an overtly positive way, but definitely not in a negative way, and more of like that was a good thing that we did for us,
right?
And like that's horrific. Like,
well, and we saw a new hero emerge out of this story, and Collins, I think it's not just a joke that no one ever gets his name right. Like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
a little piece of his character, and the only one who gets his name right is the last whatever you call those blue creatures
Hold on.
that
I
he
got
looks in
it.
the eye and he says Collins, and then he shoots him.
Fezron.
Fezron, the last Fezron.
Fezron. Yeah, Fezron. But yeah, no, 100%. This idea that, um, I'm a little unclear. I'm assuming that Collins is meant to be A on the younger side and B on the smaller side, right? Like,
Yes.
so like he is.
I mean, by my math, he is like between 17 and 20. Like they keep
I
referring to him as boy,
that's
and
yeah.
like it showed him at 9 years old, and then it showed him 8 years later, which is age 17, which is
Mhm.
when he was sentenced to 10 years. So he is
He's
no
got to be
older
around
than
there.
27. And if
Yeah,
he were 27, he wouldn't be on this thing because he would have already served his 10 years
yeah,
and he'd be in the clear.
yeah, yeah. And 27 would put him presumably closer in age. I think both Lewis and Clark were 30 and 33, 34, something like that. And that was considered like ancient. So, yeah, so there is the idea that this is the young kid, no one respects him because no one remembers his name. He's looking to prove himself, yada, yada, yada. And yeah, he goes through this whole journey. He is kind of this other kind of, I don't want to say like they're everyone not Lewis and Clark is a red shirt, but they are kind of red shirts, you know, aside from York, I guess. And Seaman, the dog, which I did want to mention last week. I forgot. I wrote a reminder. That's a real dog who went on the expedition.
Wow. Wait, and made it round trip? Like
made
he
it all the way back. Yes, yes.
That's crazy.
So
what you're telling me is like the movie Homeward Bound could actually happen.
Well, the dog was with them the whole time, but I meant to mention that when I mentioned last week that per the historical record, only one member of the core Discovery died. You know, so there was only one death, and he died of what they believe is appendicitis. Everyone else who went on the trip, the whole 2 years there and back, made it, including the dog, which is a Newfoundland dog, kind of that big shaggy thing. So yeah, another real character. So aside from Lewis, Clark, York, and the dog, everyone else seems to be relatively expendable. Even though we spend some more time with some of the other characters, like the Jensen character, right? He's kind of like our lead criminal.
Yeah.
You know, but outside of that, everyone does feel like they're just there as essentially the cannon fodder. Like we'll bring them in for a little bit and then something will happen to them. Kind of like in like the Scooby-Doo way you mentioned last week. It's kind of what happens. It's what happens in your procedural TV shows where that's
right.
focused on your detectives or your lawyers, your doctors or whatever. Who comes into the story just for an episode or two, this is a side character. And it seems like they're treating the rest of the crew in that way. So you're introduced to somebody, you get a little bit of their backstory. They become a main feature in the plot, and in this time, for volume 3, that was Collins.
Right. Yeah. It's okay. So I have to get the elephant out of the room for me. And I have to say that I did not enjoy volume 4. I feel like they took a swing at like, we're going to mix up the formula here a little bit, which I understand the impulse to do.
Yeah.
But I got so attached to the previous structure. I also found, all of the time jumping annoying. It's like 1801, 1804. Like these are small jumps. Like they did stick the landing. Like I did think, ending in the room with the survivor guy.
Oh yeah. Helm,
and having
Captain Helm. Yeah.
And having him written on the walls in feces.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't give him a pencil. But yeah, it was like it's just not what I was here for, and I hate being that type of reader, but also it was just like, yeah, I just wasn't vibing with the second volume in this set like I did, volumes 1 and 2, and I loved volume 3.
Well, and I think there is something to that, this idea that, we talked about the I mean, just in the naming convention of the arcs, right? All the volumes are something and something, some Latin word and some Latin word. Although volume three was what, Chiropetra and Carniformes.
Yeah.
Carapetra are bats, which makes sense given the creature that was there. That second one, Carmiformes, I don't believe is a real word, but I assume it's some sort of fake Latin portmanteau of carnivore and something else, maybe
Yeah.
like whatever the bird creature is. But still, it is still the same convention, like flora, fauna, and things like that. And you're right, volume four, as we mentioned, we teased last week, is just called Sasquatch. So there's no real mystery there. They're not going for the faux Latin or the real Latin. They're not going from a taxonomic kind of designation. It's just Sasquatch. It just, I mean, they probably just, I mean, they could have called it Bigfoot. You know,
Oh yeah,
but
totally. I
yeah,
mean,
but it does show that they're, I mean, maybe even like Chris Dingus and Matthew Roberts know that that volume is different and was meant to be different in a way.
I definitely, I'm certain that's the case.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like I know they were trying to do something different, something, but like I said, they were taking a swing at like,
yeah,
we're going to tell this a little bit out of order. We're going to do, something a little unorthodox here. Um, I just, I wasn't tracking with it as cleanly as I had been with the story up until that point, which is fine. I also noticed, um, it's curious to me whether I would have noticed this had I not read the title pages, but I think I did notice when the inking changed. Because Chris Dingus was
oh
pencils
yeah.
and ink in volume one and two,
Mm,
and then pencils and ink for the first two issues of volume three, and then he has no inking credits in volume four, which I
yeah.
assume that's just the grind of a monthly comic,
Yes,
and he draws
yeah.
every page in such detail. Like,
Yeah, I assume that's a scheduling thing of like, hey, bring someone in just ha- add someone else to the assembly line to help it out there. I don't think I don't think it's wildly noticeable. I think maybe it gets a little, I don't want to say heavier.
yes,
I
no,
think it's,
that was the word that I thought of,
yeah,
but I also was
yeah,
hesitant to say it because I'm like,
yeah,
I don't want to say anything that sounds like praise or criticism.
yeah.
It wasn't better or worse. It was different enough that I picked up on it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But I was also primed to look for it because I knew it changed.
Because you saw, yeah, you saw like, oh, well, what's going on here. You mentioned a little bit, and I'm curious how overall, because you mentioned the time jumping, and we get the other journal, the journal of Captain Helm.
The
Another,
lettering was
well,
difficult to
yeah,
read on that journal.
I
Yeah.
was gonna mention that as well,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
also just shout out in general the idea that, hey, you know making it visually different, so that like this isn't Lewis's journal. We're reading someone else's
Right.
handwriting, and it is like full actual cursive. So once again, we go back to the idea of, if you're of a certain age, do you even know what some of these letters look like? But what I wanted to ask is, they introduced that in volume three, obviously, so they can kind of really reinforce it in volume four, because
Yeah.
we get a lot of it in volume four. How did you feel about the time jumping, in I guess just the structure in general, the decision to not the narrative decision to show us a previously unknown expedition out west, but the actual construction of like when they threw pages in that jump back and forth and things like that. How did you feel about that?
That's a great question because this is always something that is an issue for me in comics.
Yeah.
I don't like lots of unnecessary time jumping. I can think of the handful of exceptions to the time where I think it's done really well. One of those, just small shout out to Department H from Matt Matkin and his wife
And wife Charlene,
Sharon.
yeah.
Charlene.
Charlene.
Yeah.
Charlene,
Um,
yeah.
they they were like reading the narration of a journal while the real time thing was happening, and then
Yes.
would switch to like one person's narrating and you're seeing the opposite thing, and then they would weave in and out. And I thought that that was cool, and it worked. It wasn't just that it was
Yeah.
cool. In this book, I totally accept, it's very much like an episode of Lost, where it's like, okay, we're on episode 17 now. This character's kind of been around in the background, but this one's going to focus on them. So before we get into what's happening presently on the island, we got a flashback to what they were doing and everything that led up to them getting on that plane, like where they were in their life before arriving on the island. Then we can get to their island plot. And it would kind of bounce back and forth in the same way that like all of season one and probably season two of Green Arrow would always like whatever he's going through in Star
Sure.
City, there was a parallel plot on the island, and both
Yep.
of them were moving chronologically forward in time.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, cool device for a little bit of time. By season four, you got to stop cutting to the island. Like,
Yeah.
it was only 5 years on the island or whatever. But anyway, so in this book, I like when it does that to introduce a character, even if it's a full issue or just 10 pages or 22 pages, whatever. It's like, okay, this is the person's backstory. But to keep cross-cutting them is suggesting some type of import other than look what we can do and it's cool and it's neat, because there were cool paneling things done with this.
That's what I was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, was this whole convoluted storytelling method just for great visuals, or was it actually necessary for the story? So where do you land on that?
I was
I
was
think
going to say
you are less thrown by things like this in reading.
I am. I think from a construction standpoint, I love the moments when it would cut just from a visual standpoint. Reading the comic, I love the moments when it would cut back and forth and they would mirror images, right? Mirror
Yeah.
images of the men standing at attention, looking at something or whatever, cutting back and forth between the previous expedition and Lewis and Clark. So visually, I love that trick there. I love the stuff that you can do with that. I liked, from a narrative standpoint, I liked the buildup, like we got in volume 3, this idea of, oh, this other party, what did they see? They went to La Charette. They encountered those settlers. They also encountered the flora disease, things like that. This idea that the things were paralleled, and we're seeing, and that we know as the reader what they've gone through because we saw Lewis and Clark go through it. Those mirrors I liked. I liked the payoff at the end of volume 4, with the idea of how the Sasquatch skull, the Cyclops Sasquatch skull, got back to Jefferson in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess it wouldn't be Washington at that point, but you know what I'm talking about. The idea that paying that full circle and him being kind of locked away in a room. I liked that part there from a narrative standpoint to tie that end up. The weird spirit journey that the Captain Helm character goes through,
Yeah.
and that also the other character goes through with the
French
random Spanish
or Spanish. Yeah.
Was it Spanish or French? I think it was
No, it was
Spanish.
Spanish. You're correct. Yeah.
Point is, I didn't get that part. Like that's one of those things. Like if you're gonna do that, like that says to me, you've either introduced the big bad of the story, okay, which maybe they have. Maybe they've introduced, maybe that spirit, maybe that is the big bad of the story.
Well, that Sacagawea hinted at the end of volume 2, right?
Yeah. And if that's the case, okay, but why do you drop that now? Because that's the kind of thing you would want to parallel. In my mind, I think you want to parallel his journey with Lewis and Clark's journey. Instead, what you've done now is you've just foreshadowed it and not given it any context.
Yes,
you've thrown it out there. You've thrown it out there to the point where it is either completely unimportant or the most important thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like by putting it out there now without any
like
peripheral
it's either
context.
a villain of the week or it's nothing at all.
But it can't be a villain of the week because Lewis and Clark didn't encounter it here.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That part was everything
it's just
else
for
was
the reader.
everything else was paralleled in terms of the Cyclops Sasquatches and things like that, paralleling their journey of like getting to this similar point at a similar type of year, right, where they hunker down for the winter. All that is paralleled, and then we watch the first expedition go further into the winter. That's when they start running out of supplies, when they resort to cannibalism, when Helm starts having these visions and all that stuff there. And if you just throw it out there, it creates a binary narrative situation. Again, either that vision and that demon or whatever the creature is means nothing, or it means everything. And if it means everything, well, now you've just dropped it in here in volume 4. And so now how long do we have, if it is, how long do we have to wait for Lewis and Clark to catch up with that now? How long do we have to wait for them to re-encounter this? And then you got to go back. Oh, right. That was a thing that one guy who went crazy saw back in how many issues ago, you know? And so that kind of narrative imbalance, that part threw me there. But like, again, so the cross-cutting of timelines doesn't inherently bother me. I think it's something that you and I definitely talked about. I'm more receptive or open to that sort of thing. It's the kind of things you can do in comics. So on its face, I had no problem with it. But that specific story choice in terms of what they showed, that's the part that didn't quite sit with me. Because it's just like, yeah, and well, now I have to remember this thing all the way through, you know,
right.
until
and
they eventually
and that was my thing, is that I was open conceptually to it because these guys... not just guys now, the whole creative team, they've earned my trust at this point. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt, but you really better have like something for me to really pay it off and say, oh yeah, that was so like perfect the way everything synced up that it was really worth my time to have gone through a more difficult way of reading the same type of story than what we had experienced in the past.
Yeah, like if that entity is the big bad at the end of the story, I'm totally fine with that. But then but what I don't want to do is get to the end, get to the reveal and be like, oh, okay, they paid it off there. But if that was the case, what could they have done differently in the lead up? You know, I don't want to think back and be like, well, if they had sprinkled it in here and there more, maybe that would have been better, versus like having a big moment with this character that we just got introduced to, right? This previous expedition. We got this big moment, and then like what happens next? And obviously, you know, we'll see how it progresses, but I can already envision, and maybe that's unfair to the creative team and to the comic, but I can envision a scenario as we get to and we start getting reveals towards the actual end game, you know, because this is volume 4 here. We made it through issues 13 to 24. It's 48 issue series, so we just hit the halfway point. So we're on the back end at this point,
which would make sense if we just met the final boss, but our characters haven't met them yet.
Yes, yeah.
So we're staying ahead of them a little bit. Yeah,
and also, did we need to meet it in this way? Could it just have been a vision of something and been like, oh, what's that thing? You know, instead the thing interacted with another character that still exists, and albeit he gets back to the president, and his brain is completely addled, but still, whatever that thing is, there's a living person who's experienced with it, you know, who has some idea of what it might be, or at least knows it exists. And so you were given so much about this thing that doesn't help the reader comprehend it at all. Doesn't give it any more context, and yet you've seen it. It's given a lot. You've given it a lot of screen time, a lot of page time. But said you haven't advanced anything with it yet. So yeah, I agree. There's a sense where it does make sense at the halfway point to introduce this character if this is going to be the main antagonist. But then again, I don't, at this point in the story, I don't see why you would give us that portion there. Because again, haven't read further, still perfectly honest here, have not read beyond what we're talking about here yet. So do these flashbacks continue? And if they do, I think it would have been a much more interesting idea if we see whatever Helm is going through. He's the last survivor there. We see him come back and he digs up the skull. And the next time we see him is him back with the president when Lewis and Clark go and talk to him. And now he's like totally crazy. And you as the reader can be like, well, what happened to him? Did he just go crazy because he was out there by himself and he saw these crazy creatures? Or is there some other thing? And then you can hint at this being, this entity, you know? Instead, we saw that full interaction and there is nothing left for the reader to think about other than just wait for this thing to show up again. Because we know
right
what
and
it's going to do.
the
It's going to
worst
try
thing
to
you can
bargain.
do for suspense is to show us the monster, right? Like that's
Well, yeah,
that's kind of
yeah,
a horror staple of like it's so much scarier showing people's reaction to it, letting the reader imagine it and like fill in the gaps and create the thing that they're scared of. Once you show it to us, we can start getting used to it. And so we may not be bothered by it by the time our characters even meet it, and then we won't share their initial terror. So I do wonder if it's a misstep, in that way.
I'm going to keep my eye on it because, yeah, like you said, it's one thing when Sacagawea talks in vague terms about some larger, greater danger, which I think at that point as a reader, you're like, well, of course there's something crazy out there. Look what we've seen already. We're already primed to think there's some crazy thing out there, whether she's leading them to it or not. We know there's something out there now. But now that we've seen it and spent time with it, does that reduce any of what they're going to encounter next? Oh, we're back to Monster of the Week now, but hey, this giant demon thing is out here. So what's the point of dealing with whatever crazy, cryptid creature we run into next volume?
Right.
Like, have they undercut their own premise by doing that? I don't know. And as I said, maybe it's unfair to speculate right now. But I can't help but think about like, well, now we've seen like they've shown their hand, and now we just got to wait for it. So like, I just got to muddle through the rest of the story, and like I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that mindset going into it. So I'm going to try to avoid having that. But as we're talking about it now, like I can't help my brain from going to that place.
I know. So I think at this point, the team has earned the benefit of the doubt to say, surely they did not spoil everything they're planning on doing, for this one really like, well, I don't know what it all adds up to 30 pages of stuff, all of the flashback stuff combined.
But maybe an issue and a half, maybe 2 issues total. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
If you add it up across
at most
the
40,
50
issues. Pages of stuff in the middle of the run.
Yeah.
At the cost of, what was shaping up to be just a like all hit, no miss series.
Yeah. And I agree that there has to be some idea. And I'm with you on the idea of I'm gonna trust the process here, and that they've shown what it is. But whatever reveal is going to be, presumably it's going to be whatever Lewis and Clark and crew figure out how to defeat it, right? Like that's
right.
I guess that there is some idea of waiting until we get to that point. But again, sitting right now, it's like, well, I don't love that decision, willing to ride it out, but I'm not in love with that narrative decision. But we'll see how it goes from here.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't mean to pull us off volume 3, which I think we both loved. Right.
I enjoyed it. Because I thought it was a necessary turn for the book, to show them.
Okay, but were you surprised by the final move? Because I thought they were like it's just the hubris of this crew is still unbelievable to me. That they're like, okay, this blue guy, one of them like bit straight through the flesh, or maybe just clawed straight through the flesh.
He bit him. He bit him, and that was the
and you think
the venom.
You think, oh, this is the monster for this, and then you find out, oh no, the monster is the guy who attacks these guys.
Yeah.
So you go to these guys and you say, we're gonna knock out the monster. Like they don't know anything about it other than this whole race of species is willing to make like human sacrifices to this thing because it's so scary. And
It's the
Lewis and
lottery,
Clark
right?
Lewis and
Yeah.
Clark are like, all right, well, I guess that's what we got to kill next.
Yeah.
Like without seeing it, no research, just go in, send Collins up, you know, feces
Yeah.
arch, and it's just like, wow, the hubris of these guys. So that was when I thought, okay, well, that was the villain of this arc. So now, um, now they're done, and they've arranged a peaceable agreement with the people of this land, which are the little blue guys. Um, and it's like, oh no, they are going to exterminate anything that is not already a known entity.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
not, they're not wiping out every rabbit and bear and deer that they encounter, but
Mhm.
anything that would surprise any settlers
Yeah. Yeah.
has to go.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I think there's something so screwed about that logic too. When they do go to the encampment there and they talk to all the other Fezrons there, and they're all kind of like appalled, like, will you just sacrifice someone to this thing? And they're like, yeah, we do that, and we all get to live. And Lewis and the humans are like, that's terrible. We'll go kill that thing for you. They're like, oh, okay, fine. You do that, great. And they do, like, as a way to help them, and then turn right around and wipe them off the face of the planet.
right.
Like that idea of like, we're going to do the noble thing, and like, yeah, we're going to take out the thing that's terrorizing you, because it's also it took one of our guys. The thing that's hunting you is also hunting us. So, we're going to team up here. Let's take this thing out, and we did it. Great, yay! You're welcome. Congratulations. And they come back in the night and slaughter them. And it's like, what the hell, man? But again, I thought that was a necessary turn to show the lack
Well,
of
otherwise
remorse.
these are just misunderstood good guys, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
if they don't do anything like that,
Yeah.
we've got a plausibility problem here.
Yes, that there is doing what they have to survive, and then making active choices like this.
Yeah.
It is, oh, these things are coming to kill us. So it is justifiable. You're out in nature. Nature is violent. Things are trying to kill you. If you kill it back before it kills you, you can sleep well at night and be like, well, listen, man, it was us or them. That's how that thing thinks. That's how we got to think. But then to come across a race of species like this, where, yeah, you make a pact and you have an understanding and you work together to defeat the thing, but turn around and be like, nah, man, can't trust it. Again, I think hubris is the right word. It shows that, and how pervasive it is amongst all the humans there, that they would see this as a necessary step and not really feel bad about it. They feel resigned to it, like, well, we got to do it, right? And everyone's like, yeah, I guess we got to do it. And that's it. There's no other debate or conversation, like
Right.
everyone was in on it. There's no conscientious objector back in the boat being like, hey guys, wait, maybe we shouldn't do this. And even, they give Collins the one moment at the end there.
I mean,
Still pulls the
Lewis's journal kind of says like, this wasn't great.
Yeah.
Like I forget his exact wording where he's like,
but also it's like, we had to do this though. It was like, we had the way it's framed is we had no choice.
which is exactly, they pick up right on that logic with the cannibalism,
Yes.
a different group,
Yes.
said a few
Yeah.
years back, but it just shows like, this is what going into the frontier and into the wilderness, like, invariably does. Eventually, survivalism leads to this and this slippery slope logic. So let's see. Okay, I think I found the page. I would say every man performed admirably, but I must be honest. What we did tonight would be a betrayal of that word.
Yeah.
And Collins saying, I'm sorry, Lewis writing that. So it's like almost worse that they're still aware of morality. They're just like, they don't have the luxury of submitting to moral decisions because they have to do what they know they're sent here to do.
Well, but in this case, though, I think we could. This is one case we can look at it through modern eyes and say, yeah, they believe they have no choice.
Yes.
In this case, But
Well, I mean, I think
they are
if
still making the active choice to do this, and you're like, well, what's going on here? Why? You don't have to do this. And they would tell you, yes, we have to. This is what we're commissioned to do. This is why we're here. And it's like, you're here to exterminate this race, this sentient race of birds with teeth and fangs, and like bird bears, I guess. They're not like, whatever they are. Like, that's why you're here, to wipe this out, off the land. And they
but
would
I think
die in the world, say
actually,
yes.
yes, that is why they were sent here.
Yeah.
It's not great. It's not pretty. But and then there's almost something like anti-hero-y, like praiseworthy about how self-aware they are. Of like, oh yeah, they like no one here is mistaking themselves for a good person.
Yeah.
None of them are trying to say, well, we did this, but we're still good. It's like, no, this sucks. We suck, but
Yeah.
it's what we had to do. For Lewis, I think he would be like, well, Jefferson would not let me back in civilization if I did not come out here and do exactly what he's instructed me to do. Right or wrong, which amazingly, and I would love it if they could stick the landing on this, if the ultimate villain of the series is Jefferson.
Well, I mean, yeah,
that would be amazing to me. But I don't think it's going there, because at the end of the day, Jefferson's not out here. No one Jefferson in his lifetime is not going to come inspect the work they've done.
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the thing that's getting me, is like, seems like there's pretty much all in the honor system.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I do think
who's going to catch you?
Well, I would imagine. I was about to say a ridiculous sentence, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would imagine in this world where Lewis is keeping two journals, the confidential one and the one for Congress, I imagine that Lewis would give the confidential journal to Jefferson. I imagine in this world that he wouldn't, that Jefferson would know everything. He would know the absolute truth of what they went through, what they did, what they saw. So he can help back up the lie that is whatever the official record is that goes to Congress. So, but yeah, I don't think you need to make Jefferson the villain.
No, history's done that.
I was like, you get plenty of stuff in real life to do. You don't need to fictionalize what happened here to make that. There's plenty of real life stuff you can go there. So, but yeah, I think the idea that this whole group has come to an understanding of like, yeah, like, we're here for a reason. That self-awareness of, yeah, we're not good people. I think that's a good call. That like they're not the heroes, but yet, they still carry themselves with that air of
exceptionalism,
arrogant. Yeah, exceptional. Yeah. I was going to say arrogance, but yeah, exceptionalism. Yeah, that like, we may not be the best of people, but we're better than them, and them applies to literally everyone else, everything they meet, every animal, every creature, every other person. Them includes all the indigenous tribes that are out there. Them includes everything they encounter. That even though we may suck as people, we're still better than all of them. And that level of hubris, again, I think it's important for the book to show that, so it isn't seen as some. So it's not written from the perspective of like, whitewashing history, that
right.
The white explorer went out there and tamed the land of these incredibly horrific creatures, monsters, that they were doing that, but at what cost did that come? At what cost did that lead to? And what kind of person could go and do that sort of thing? And the answer is not a good one. So them kind of recognizing that, and kind of leveling the playing field maybe a little bit between, again, the enlisted army men, the volunteers, the conscripted men, all of that stuff there, kind of leveling that field for all of them to get them all on the same level, which isn't all that high, but more equal footing, I think that's an important thing to show.
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what did you make of like okay, so they're getting really into like hallucinations and fever dreams, which
Yeah.
I think is an interesting area for Matthew Roberts to play with.
Hmm.
Um, Not my favorite thing to read, but what did you think of Sacagawea's plotline? She's kind of on the sideline for both of these.
She is.
Um,
She is.
with
Um,
a fever, but it's not just a fever. Like she's having like a hallucination or vision quest type thing that
I,
directly corresponds to her health.
yeah, and it does. I, I'm working under the assumption that what she is reliving memories. Like that was her life.
That was what I
You
thought
know.
too, but it seemed like maybe she made some choice in this dream that was different or because
See,
like
I was
when
gonna say,
she decided to step up and fight back is when he was like, okay, you can follow along. But I'm like, surely that's exactly what happened.
well, I think she's reliving that this idea of needing to fight, this idea that was hinted at in last week in the first two volumes, that she has some chosen one aspect to it, right? That there's something about specifically about her child, the child that will be Jean Baptiste Castano or whatever the guy's name is, this child that does exist in history, but this idea that she is meant for something, she has a chosen one feel to her. And yeah, I read that as she was re-experiencing those moments, those kind of pivotal moments of her childhood and of her journey that led her to this point, and she was drifting in and out of reality at that point, right? She was re-experiencing those memories as if they were happening, right then and there. But I thought that was interesting to get a little more of that, to get more of her story again, to set up the fact that there is something special about here, which is they're clearly trying to lean into. Mixed with that, I think when you talk about hallucinations, we talked about the things that Captain Helm saw from the previous expedition, right? Where the colors get real kind of vibrant and neon when, it gets very psychedelic at that point, which was
Yeah.
an interesting visual choice there. But again, when you're getting into the hallucinations, the visions in your head, there aren't any rules. So you can kind of do whatever. I thought visually it looked cool and interesting. Again, not my favorite part of the narrative. But you are right. There is something to the idea that multiple characters, even in different timelines, in different parts of the story, are having these types of visions slash experiences.
Yes.
I think that's notable
Yeah. It felt a little like treading water for this character who has
for
been
Sacagawea, definitely. Yeah,
who's been, so essential. Yet, if like, is there any way if she's along with this crew, is there any way Collins is the one to go up in the arch? Like, no.
oh yeah,
Sacagawea would have
yeah,
gone up there, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
Collins
yeah.
would have never had his coming of age moment.
Mhm.
Of like instead of being the one who is constantly called Collins and Collings and Collings. First of all, it's like it would be one thing if he had like some crazy Scandinavian or like Dutch name or something like that, but for it to be like such a vanilla name and no one can get it right says so much about the perception of the guy,
Mhm. Mhm.
and none of it's good.
Well, yeah. I, I think what we see though is that Collins, he's presented as a seemingly decent person. You know, he's someone
Yes,
that's reliable. He's trustworthy. He's someone who is a generally good person, and yet no one respects him because he's a kid and because he's young. That is a good point, though. I hadn't thought about the idea of if Sacagawea were here, then she would have gone up the arch. That's absolutely right. So there is
so you had
a
to take her off
narrative.
the board for some
Yeah, yeah,
reason.
yeah. But also part of it, I think a little bit too, and maybe this is you said treading. It clicked. When you said treading water goes back to the idea of when the story grafts onto known historical record. This idea of there are fixed points in the history and the story that have to converge. And so in the historical record, they don't meet Sacagawea until like November, and she gives birth in February. So they meet her, and a few months later, she gives birth. Here, she's been with the group since May, like right at the start, basically the literal conception of her child. So this idea that maybe she can't be too involved, as they wait for the moment when this child will actually be born, because again, they're building it up to be kind of a big thing, and so it's almost, maybe it's like they don't want to use her too much. Like like we saw her in action, we saw what she can do, so no one doubts that. But now here, as we're moving into, we're getting closer to the time when something has to happen, right? AKA the child has to be born. This kid's got to be born, and I'm going to assume, if and when the story gets to February 1805, like he's going to be born on the day he was born. Like that was recorded by Lewis in his journal. So we're bumping up to a fixed point here, that as we near that, as the story nears that point on their calendar, that they feel the need to kind of parcel out when Sacagawea does something, how available she is, yada yada yada. And I think this is kind of maybe the first case of that, where we can give her some character moments without her having to be like an action moments, which is what we got in the first two volumes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see her trajectory, that her whole Drax the Destroyer vibe is something born out of survival and necessity, rather than like something intrinsic in her person.
Yeah. Well, but I think,
but also the
both,
whole chosen one of it all.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. This idea that she was training for this specifically, you know, and I would say training at a young age. She's like 16, 17 in the actual, like in the history, she's still a child. So if she's training for this, she was training at like 9 or something for all of this, which I guess maybe makes sense if you're a chosen one warrior that's gonna do something great when they get older. But yeah, I was okay with that, because it did lead to some larger narrative things, or some more expansive narrative things, and I think maybe also that dovetails with what they were doing timeline wise.
Oh, sure.
Because they were cutting back and forth. They cut down on a lot of the action. I felt in both of these stories here, in both these volumes here, because they had less pages devoted to it. You know, you still had like your one big battle with whatever the bat creature was, like that would decapitate its victims and put that head onto itself, which is like crazy body horror stuff. Like that was wild.
Yes.
In terms of what that creature was. Absolutely bananas there. You know, you have one big fight on that, and then, you know, they encounter the Sasquatches, the Cyclops Sasquatches, and they have some encounters there, but there isn't like a big knockdown drag out kind of brawl there. So they tone down the action a little bit more, and I think getting some more character moments, whether they're specific to a character or just like the general ethos of the group, I think that stuff's helpful to the story.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like, those are basically all my notes and thoughts on this this volume, or these two volumes rather. Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm surprised that they don't have hardcover deluxes that, you know, have 1 and 2 combined, or at this point a compendium. I guess 45 issues starting to push it for compendium.
Well, they have deluxe hardcovers. They have 2 of them. They have 24. 24 sheets. So the hardcovers. So it's half and half. So you can get 24 at a time. So yeah, you'd be the same kind of stopping point we're at right now. I do have one last thing, and I will preface this by saying, in an unusual turn for me, I have not read beyond what we're discussing right now, so I don't know what's coming up next. I can genuinely say that. So anything I tease from this point is simply a theory. And I don't think it's a hot take theory. And I don't think it's an implausible one, and I don't think it's one that any other reader might not have. Um, but they keep talking about these arches here, and I got to say, the one thing I did really enjoy was like the diegetic conversation amongst the men of the expedition, who are like, "Hey, every time we see one of these arches, something bad happens." And the arches are all made of something different, and whatever it's made of, that's what comes and kills us. I like that kind of self-awareness. I did like that. I like that there's an understanding of what's happening in the world, which brings me to why arches. And I think it feels it feels like it's almost too obvious to me. Which maybe thinks that it's actually what's going to happen. But the idea that the reason the St. Louis Arch exists, the actual arch, in the one that exists in our world, that's like the anti-arch.
Well, it's the arch of this is now made out of human progress, rather than. But we refer to that arch as the gateway to the west, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, are all of these other arches gateways to other dimensions and things like that? Because those Furzons or whatever they're called, Ewoks, I'm going to keep calling them. They have a whole history where they lived in a place with two suns and this bat creature and things like that, which really makes me think that archway was a gateway to some other realm or so, like however the metaphysics of this world works. Which would make sense. A lot of the spiritual things happening might not be hallucinations. They might actually be spiritual something.
That's fantastic. That is not what I had in mind, but I love that of the theory.
Oh, when you said there was no other way it could go, it's like a gateway. I get it.
No. I wasn't thinking of them as literal gateways.
You were thinking of the territorial claim of like,
yes,
we knocked down all your gateways. Now we build ours, this is what's coming.
And our arch is what repels. It's what keeps these things away.
Oh, that's really good.
But when you said gateway, I love the idea that maybe we put a gateway up, and the west that is our west isn't our world. It's a gateway to a world.
Crazy.
Like when you said it that way, that the actual west of the United States in this world that they're exploring has all these creatures here. So we build a gateway. So when we cross west, we go to the one that doesn't have all this crap here and have all these creatures. And that's why the arch is there. So that is a different theory.
That's a super fun. Okay. We got to run these past Matthew Roberts.
That plays into the gateway of the west sort of thing. But regardless, I mean, it seems odd. Like you can't put arches and have these things to have the visual there and not invoke the St. Louis Arch. So there has to be
since the first one we saw, I didn't know there were more coming.
Yes.
So I was geographically they must be at where the Missouri meets the Mississippi. They're actually in St. Louis. That's the arch.
And technically they're not at that point. They are further north, but the visual there is right there on the banks of a river, right? Which that river would still be Mississippi at that point. But yes, it is meant to it has to invoke that. So it means that kind of thing has to be important. But I love this idea that there are, we both thought of two different possibilities here. But yeah, that just throwing it out there that it's going to be important. The St. Louis Arch is going to end up being like the most important, whatever its purpose is. It clearly has some resonance as to why whatever these creatures that Lewis and Clark are encountering, why they're no longer here. Why they're no longer an issue, why they're no longer roaming, why they're no longer present. The St. Louis Arch has to have some larger, metaphysical meaning or resonance in the world. And so, I want to throw that out there and then, track as we go in the back half of the story, track and see if either one of I was going to track my theory, but now I want to track if either one of our theories,
unless this is true. All building to a product placement for McDonald's. And they're the Golden Arches, right?
Well, yes.
The movie Coming to America really broke my brain because remember he's got his own
Yes.
parallel. Uh,
Yeah.
Admiral Fitzwallace has
Yes.
McDowell's restaurant,
McDowell's. Yep.
and they're
Yep.
golden
Yep.
arcs instead of golden arches.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I now and like that has so burned into my brain that now I forget which one is which.
Yes. The Golden
Um,
Arches
which is exactly what he wanted, right? I'm
yes.
the ideal McDowell's customer.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway,
But yeah, no, I am looking forward, despite my reservations about the narrative happenings in volume four. I think you and I are aligned. We're still very interested in seeing where the story goes and seeing if the reservations we have are just temporary because we've stopped reading right
well,
now.
it really
We've taken a
felt
break,
like a one-off.
It did. And I guess there are other ways, and we talk about this too, oftentimes with books. Like there's a world where there's an entire arc, like an entire 6-issue arc, that's just the Helms expedition.
Yes, and that was that. Okay, so let me say,
And that could have been volume four.
as
They could have
jumbled
done
as I
all
felt
that.
like four was, I prefer what they did to that. Just
And
having
I
like
would assume that
pull us
given our
away from
history
Lewis and Clark.
yes,
Yeah.
given our history talking about this. Now the other way they could have done it is volume four could have been like 85% flashback, but maybe it's Lewis reading Helm's journal, you know?
Oh, yeah.
It's Lewis. We see that Lewis, like, not only did Jefferson give him the Cyclops Sasquatch skull, he also gave him the journal of this previously unknown first expedition out west. And so our modern day presence is Lewis reading this and maybe discussing with Clark or whatnot, but then he's reading the journal as opposed to the construction now, which is mirrors what happens in the current timeline of Helm writing the journal as things are happening or right after they happen. It's recollection. So they could have done it in a way where Lewis is reading all this and the majority of the issues for that entire Sasquatch arc is just one flashback, of what happened there. Again, you would probably like that less anytime we have a book that pulls us out of the main narrative for a flashback or a time jump or a perspective jump kind of thing.
I mean,
I know it's not
really
your
bothers
bag.
me is when it's like a multi-volume thing and it's the penultimate volume. And it feels
Oh,
like
sure. Okay, yeah.
they're running
We're doing
out
this now.
right. They're
Yeah.
running out the clock before they hit the conclusion.
Yeah.
Like the one where it bothers me the most, even though I adore the series, is Sweet Tooth because it literally is like during the final battle,
Action stops.
they
Yeah.
cut for 6 issues
Yeah.
to another trade, and you're just like, did I miss something in the publication order here? And that was one that I read in single order, and I was like, was there like an annual or something that like wrapped up that really climactic moment? Even though that story in volume 5 or whatever the penultimate one is there is fantastic. It explains
everything.
it explains like what the curse is, like how this came to be, why it happened, all of this
It explains
stuff.
the book.
Right. It
Yeah.
explains the book. And then you get back to the battle and the battle matters less, even though the battle had my full attention.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So it was an interesting choice. I think probably ultimately the right one. I just feel like so many inferior books now pick that up and do that, that I just am a little weary of it because I'm like, don't do it for the sake of it. Do it if you're really gonna stick the landing.
Well, and I at least appreciate the idea that they introduced the Helm character in that first expedition in the third volume before they were really important in the fourth volume.
Yes.
So they at least had an idea of we got to lay some track now, so we can have the reveal of, oh, this is where Jefferson got that skull.
Oh,
You know?
I mean, I think the setup payoff structure here,
It works well. It works.
you can tell you're dealing with a TV guy, right? Like,
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you really can. Like he's, like I am occasionally, I'm often surprised by things, but I'm never like blindsided because as soon as you think about it for a second, you realize like, oh, this has been telegraphed, a little
Yes.
bit, not
Yeah.
not in a
Yeah.
ham-handed way, but like in
It's
a
well, it's been foreshadowed. Been
foreshadowed.
foreshadowed.
Yes,
Yeah.
there it is. Um, yes. So like, I was surprised. Like the most surprised I've been is when they slaughter the blue creatures,
Yes.
and like as soon as I started reading volume 4, I'm still churning, the end of 3 in my mind, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like eventually we had to get here. Otherwise, this is just the white hero story
Yes.
of
White
the
saviors.
West, which
Yeah.
is like
That's a
that's
bad book.
absolutely the story we do not want
Yeah, that's a
from a book
bad
called
book.
Manifest Destiny.
Indeed.
And like it's interesting because if he were not dealing with Native Americans, indigenous people in this book, you would be tempted to interpret those blue creatures as being like allegorical stand-ins for that. But since
I
they're
think they still
also
are.
here,
I
they
think they
are in
still
a
are.
sense, but
Yeah.
they're not like they're not in like the really simplistic one-to-one way.
No,
Like,
no, no. Yeah.
and I think that's
General,
the beauty of it.
I
Yes,
think it's
no, I
general
agree. It
attitude.
is a stand-in.
Yes, general attitude towards. And you talked
Exactly.
about this
Yeah.
idea that everyone else is a them. The exceptionalism is
Yes.
everything we encounter is other. Doesn't matter who or what it is. They're other than us, and we're above that. So yeah, I think it's definitely meant to be a stand-in, because I do feel there does have to be some sort of direct reckoning with the indigenous people. Do you agree with that or no?
Yes, I do,
can't all
because
it can't all be allegory with
somehow
creatures,
they are living harmoniously with all of this crazy stuff in the land,
which
and
is commentary in and of itself. Yeah,
right, and it proves that that's an option
yeah,
for humanity, not for Americans.
yes, yeah,
Like Americans are like, if we don't clear it out and conquer it and make it exclusively ours,
yeah,
then we have not done what we came here to do, and
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
failure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, uh, that, and they seem to be letting them fall into their own snares. They're like, oh yeah, you guys should go that way. And then they'll switch languages and be like, you're gonna take them there, right? But like, you're not gonna go with them. And she's like, oh no, I'll make sure they go.
Yeah, I'm going
right
with them.
into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
jaws of that thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah,
But
there
still
is.
don't know what her game is.
We
Like,
still don't. Yeah. So they are
you
definitely
can be
slow
for
playing
them or
second to
against
wheel.
them, or
Yeah.
totally indifferent to them and just be on her own side, which seems much more likely.
Yeah, yeah. You could see that. You could.
By the way, I looked up the
I
Sacagawea
think,
coin, and she does have the baby strapped to her back.
of course, she does.
So I
Yeah.
think that's the iconic image of her. But I was like chewing on that more, trying to like read up on the U.S. Mint website about those
Mhm.
coins to see like, was the narrative in 2002 that she was like this just naive, super helpful guide, who just really wanted these white people to do well? Like, was that the narrative they were trying to spin with her, or were they like just kind of admitting like she was there, she did a lot, they wouldn't have survived without her, without commenting on her motive or character or anything like that? And I couldn't really find anything, which made me think. I'm sure it's, since it was on a government website at some point, it's in a national archive somewhere, but it was not on the current U.S. Mint website.
Sure, sure.
But neither were pennies. So,
Yeah, that's true.
so they clear stuff out quickly, I guess.
And yeah, well, but yeah, I don't think my understanding now, the way what I have read about it is the idea that like, yes, she was there. Yes, she proved helpful. No, she did not save them.
No, I think it was more
But
like
yeah,
she
yeah.
knew the land and terrain better, and she knew how to live off
Yeah.
the land better than they did.
Yeah. And also the idea, like, yeah, she wasn't like out there because I got to help these guys because this is the right thing to do. There is part of the idea of like, yeah, let's just like kind of got no choice,
Right. Well, that,
Yeah.
and it's like, I've got a baby with me. My husband's out here. I'm
Yeah.
out here.
Yeah.
So anyway, I am very interested in her. I hope that they don't just keep dragging their feet with her until the very end. I would like to see a Sacagawea-centric plot in one of the next 2 volumes.
I agree. I agree. I think that would be a good setup now. And it's knowing that we have 4 volumes left, right? Knowing that there are 4 arcs left. We've got 24 more issues. It may come down to, again, the idea of when did they know they were going to end the series. Worth noting now as we get towards, not quite, I don't think these issues, but maybe starting in volume 7, we're bumping up towards COVID in 2020 when things took a break. And so those kind of things can, obviously had major effects on how books were scheduled and published. So, was 48 always the planned end? I don't know. It's a nice number when you have 6-issue arcs, so we'll have to see maybe if we can, what the plan was, that they had a plan. At what point did they decide they were going to end it? Because those kind of things play into when you're going to use up some capital, some story capital to do things like they do in volume 4 here. Like what we're hoping, I think we're both hoping they do with Sacagawea, do something now, a little early, a little before the end, so we can build up to whatever the end is, as opposed to having it all happen at the end because, oh crap, we're at the end. We got to do it now.
All right. I have one last question to ask you speculatively.
Sure. All
right. I assume because it's historical fiction, Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea all have to survive this story.
Yes, I believe so.
I believe so as well. Like, if nothing else, Lewis's journal has to make it back to Jefferson. Otherwise, there's literally no point to this story.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think
I just want to make sure we're tracking on the same page here of they're following close enough to history that they're not going to say, oh no, these people never made it back and they just got gobbled up by the wilderness. That would suck.
I think Lewis, Clark, Sacagawea, her baby, York, and the dog, Seaman. I think they all live. I think everyone else is expendable and become part of the story. But I think those main characters, main as in known historical figures, I think they make it all the way there and back. And maybe some of the crew do as well. I don't know. But those definitely, I think, all do. I don't think don't believe
Collins is too good of a person to make it. Like the rapist guy who's now missing part of his foot will make it. Like if someone else on the crew makes it, it's going to be one of those characters where you're not really that happy that they made it.
It'll be Jensen. It'll be Jensen.
Oh, Jensen, yes, right.
The lead criminal guy, someone like that. But yes, I don't think they're going to deviate that far from history. I believe they're framing the story around the idea that the expedition happened and word of them traveling there and back, they did all of that, but everything they said about what happened, all fiction, because this is what really happened. But they have to all make it back for that story to come out, for that fiction to even be to be put out there. So no, I don't think there's going to be that huge deviation from the historical record.
Great. All right, we're on the same page.
Yep.
And if you're listening to us in real time, shoot us a comment on Instagram post or a Blue Sky, at us, and let us know what your speculation is, or even if you just want to nitpick our speculation without venturing your own opinion like a coward, feel free to do that. And we will see you next Thursday for volumes 5 and 6.
Yep. Issues 25 to 36. Yes, that happens, right? Yes. Yeah, volume 5 and 6. Cool.
Great.
Peace.
We'll see you next week.
Peace.